This is The Changed Physician, episode 208. Welcome back to The Changed Physician. I am Melissa Cady, the challenge doctor, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, who's very excited about this episode. You can tell if you're watching the video. Well, this episode is an unexpected episode, not fully, but, quite timely in the fact that, Kevin and I both had COVID around the same time. In fact, we're about to find out exactly maybe when those first day of symptoms happened. Why don't you just kind of chime in, Kevin, and let us know what happened?
Yeah, so it was a little crazy because we've been pretty good. Like, I didn't think we were as strict as we were until you go someplace and then you're like, holy crap, people are just like, they don't either understand this or they don't appreciate it or whatever. And we're also we're kind of homebodies to begin with. So it's not like when people, oh my God, I can't go out. My life is over. We're like, oh no, we're in our house and we like it here. So it hasn't been like a huge big deal, but we've had no cases in our house. Despite my wife's an urgent care doc. She's been exposed to lots and lots and lots of COVID and she's never gotten sick. And so we've done really, really well. And okay, a couple things. We are all vaccinated. We're boosted for those who are eligible to be boosted. And maybe we got a little bit complacent, but I don't necessarily think so. So we had this big plan, big trip, like literally the first big trip in a couple of years where there's a flight involved, multiple flights involved. We're going out of the country to Scotland and then to London. We're all prepared and ready for it. And the little kind of kicker is my son's best friend is the son of our probably our best family friends. Like we're really close and we've traveled with them before, and they don't live here. They live out in the Midwest. And my son is a year older than their son. My son just finished his freshman year of college and their son was graduating high school. And my son's like, I want to go out and I want to surprise him for his graduation. We're like, okay, if you want to, you can figure it out. So he did it and flew out and they had a great time until he's literally flying home. And he, and then he learns that he's like his best friend's like, oh, I don't feel well. So his friend has COVID, ends up being COVID positive by test. And then Aiden's home. Thank God. I mean, I kind of feel bad for the people on the plane, but you got to remember this. Like, there's an asymptomatic period with this. And if nobody's turned in symptomatic and you're not sure of your exposure, you have absolutely no idea. Mm-hmm. So he gets home and he's symptomatic. Like he gets in town, boom, he gets it. So he's got COVID. We're like, okay, I'm right. Like, what, we're supposed to leave in like, I can't remember exactly, 2 or 3 weeks or something. So I'm like, okay, realistically, looking at the data on vaccinations and his age and stuff, he's going to be fine. He'll clear it. And then we can supposedly travel after 10 days. And he gets home, which is another whole other thing. Like, how are you supposed to get home? Like, I was thinking he flew into Portland. We live south, 90 minutes south. And I was like, well, maybe we can actually just put him in a hotel and he can just quarantine there for the first 5 days at least. Ended up one of his friend's dads drove up and picked both of them up because he was with another friend and put him in the back seat, opened the windows, wore a mask the whole time. Apparently never caught anything. We get him home. We direct him straight downstairs and we isolate him in his room. Now, they say this, the distances here, like exposure where you're supposed to be concerned is like within, I think, 3 feet and more than 15 minutes total for the day. So if you have multiple interactions and they're under 3 minutes, but if they all add up to be 15 minutes, that's supposed to be a close contact with COVID. We were never within 3 feet of him. In fact, we were never within 6 feet of him. Every time he was out of his room, he had an N95 mask on. We have a split level home. So we have the living area. Then we have a center area where the kids' bed and bathrooms are. And then there's a basement below it. His room is here. We're like, okay, you're in your room. You're going to use that bathroom. That's the COVID bathroom. That's it. You are in your room or not. And it's like prison, right? You bring out a cutting board with the food. Yeah, prisoner will eat now. And so no close contact. So everything's going well. Yeah, I guess the first kind of day or two for him, he had symptoms. I think day 2, he said, was the worst for him, mostly with kind of the fevers and chills and stuff and muscle aches.
Yeah.
And then he's getting better and he's getting better and it's getting better. About day 5 or 6, maybe actually, I think it was closer to day 7. So during this process, we're upstairs, and then I'm the only one who uses the basement, like literally, because we have a TV down there, and I'll sit like kind of like my grandfather used to do, and I would watch TV and movies. So I'm down there watching TVs and movies. 6-7 days after he has been isolating, and we're getting close to when we start looking at trips. In fact, I was like, okay, I'm kind of confident here. I'm going to buy our train tickets when we're going to transfer from Edinburgh down into London, blah, 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 blah. On one night, I couldn't sleep. And about every 2 to 3 months, I'll get horrible insomnia. It just happens. And I couldn't sleep. And I'm like, is this insomnia? And I'm like walking around, going out to the couch in the living room, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I felt a tickle in my throat. And then I'm like, okay, this is a little weird. And we have allergies. It's allergy season here. I don't know. So then at that point I went to the basement, and I'm just like, I'm going to stay down here. I don't know what's going on. And then it started getting a little bit more tickling, a little bit, and something, I'm like, this is weird. This is weird. I tell my wife the next day, I'm like, I'm mashed up. I'm downstairs. I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on. I think I might have COVID. She's like, you don't have COVID. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't have COVID? I mean, and she goes, you haven't been around him. And she goes, I'm with COVID patients every day. I mean, she was like, there's no way you have COVID. And I'm like, okay. So she goes off to work, and I'm still down there sitting in the stupid basement, right, trying to figure things out. And then I'm getting worse and kind of getting worse. And it's like, I mean, this makes no sense. Like, I don't have just a cold because I don't have any exposure. The only thing here is, long story short, by the end of the day, I was like, okay, I'm sick. The closest thing I could kind of approximate is when I had the flu in 2018, where it hits like a hammer. Like I always laugh when people during the whole, oh, COVID is just the flu, and they want to make it light of it. And I'm like, well, you must not have had the flu, because I had the flu in 2018 and it was freaking awful. Like 5 days of absolute hell.
Yeah. And
so this, you can kind of feel it hit, and then you start the rigors, which are, I just find that I find that sensation like totally fascinating. Like I do. I think it's not something like I would want to do every day, but I really find it absolutely fascinating how your body's doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse and getting worse and getting worse. And then by about 5 or 6 p.m., I started getting the myalgias, but then my head started to hurt, and I don't ever get headaches. Like, I never get headaches, or I should say rarely get headaches. And that was something, and I'm pretty good. Like, I think we've talked a little bit about pain. I don't really actually experience a lot of like severe pain, period. That was awful. Like, it felt like my head was going to pop. And it was like, it got so bad. The only thing, I couldn't watch anything. I couldn't read anything. I was trying to lie down, but then I couldn't sleep. So what I basically did is I put on music, like wordless music. Had to be something that I could just sort of trance out on. And that would get me through a couple hours at a time. And so anyway, so now I'm like, okay, I've got COVID. Earlier that morning, I'd taken a rapid. The rapid was negative, which tells you absolutely nothing. Like, I want to, at some point we're going to talk about testing, and I think where the utility really lies. But I have exposure to somebody. I'm like, I got COVID. There's nothing I can do. And we're supposed to leave soon, like 5, 6, 7, whatever the days were. So then actually it's not 5, 6, 7. Anyway, what I ended up having to do is I had to rebook my flights. And then I'm like, I don't know how in the hell, like, I've been around my wife and kids, or my wife and daughter. So then we're watching them. Like, what are we going to have to do? Like, what are we going to have to do? Because I forgot to add my son's best friend's family, the people who we're going with, ended up having to rebook all their tickets to revive, because they were going to go out to Ireland the week before. We went to Scotland, meet us in Scotland, and then we were going to Scotland. Then they were going to leave, go back home. So they ended up they had to rebook everything to get through his kind of COVID time in order to get to Scotland, and then kind of just flip the weeks around. So I'm like, what are we going to have to do now? We can't, like, like if they get sick, blah, blah, blah. So needless to say, I'm still isolating. Aiden continues to get better and better and better. After the first day, it was kind of weird because it wasn't a big deal. Like after that first, like there was I had about a 12-hour section, 8 to 10 hours where the symptoms sort of kind of proceeded. There was about another 12-hour section from about 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. that was pretty hellish. That was where the head came in. And then it was like not, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like not a big deal. I kind of got this intermittent cough, which I still kind of have now, but it wasn't that bad, but it totally disrupts your travel. So then I had to I'm watching everybody. We get closer. I'm like, okay, I'm going to rebook my flights. So I rebooked my flights. My daughter tests on a rapid negative. My wife tests on a rapid negative. And then they both PCR'd on Friday, the before we were supposed to leave. And they were both negative and they've never shown any symptoms. I'm like, well, okay, we got so they all flew out. And then long story short is I did better and everybody's gone and I'm hanging out by my house for too long by myself. Everything gets better and then I fly out. And so, but I just couldn't, actually, I should add, there's a host of other things in there that just made this trip absolutely freaking, you couldn't imagine so many things going wrong before you leave as much as we had. Like it was freaking crazy. But anyway, long story short, I finally get there and, it was obviously through the finance a little bit different because I had to rebook my tickets. Yeah. And luckily I didn't have to rebook my entire family's tickets like my friends did, but it makes you think travel is more complicated now. We flew Air Canada, which I'm really thankful for. Air Canada still has a mask mandate, which totally makes sense. Like not wearing a mask on a plane is stupid. I don't care. It is absolutely asinine to not wear a mask on a plane. You have no idea what's happening to anybody next to you. The people next to you may have absolutely no idea whether or not they're infected. As I said, my son didn't know until he got home and kind of heard, oh my God, his friend was feeling sick and then ended up testing positive. So you have no idea that all these asymptomatic spreaders, but nobody, I should say Air Canada was really good, but I flew another, I had to fly Emerald Isle or something from Dublin into Edinburgh. Nobody's wearing a mask. Like nobody is wearing a mask. Like it, and you're just going to get sick. And all I could think about was that 12 hours I had was so bad. I would hate to be anywhere other than in my house for that 12 hours because it sucked. It was freaking hell. And then then having to isolate when you're someplace else. Like it's crazy. So in my household, like what I was thinking is like, okay, if we are going to ever fly again in the near term, near being a couple years, probably three years at least, I'm going to look for direct flights, single point. So one airline from one city to another, and that's going to kind of influence how we travel. Trying to figure out this isolation thing is the other big thing. I'd probably take like if I have travel coming up for the next 3 to 4 weeks prior, we're just going to stay away. Yeah. Like not even tempt it because it's so bad. Travel insurance, I've never really purchased before, but I'll probably be thinking about that in the future for these kind of things. But yeah, I mean, it was just crazy, just crazy. And we've been so good about this whole thing. And I'll add on the way home. So we've been gone. Nobody's masking anywhere. My son and I feel like we got the golden ticket because we're boosted, we're vaxxed, and we've had recent COVID. So if you look kind of the data, you're kind of the best protected person. We're like, yeah, this is awesome. My wife and daughter are not. So when we went and saw like a show, they wore masks and things. But we get home. The day we get home, my daughter's like, I don't think these are allergies. She's got COVID. So, and my wife unbelievably is like, must be one of these genetic freaks because they drove home together in their car. I had to drive in because we had 2 cars up the airport, and she has taken 2 PCRs, has been asymptomatic, and still has not.
Wow, good for her.
But anyway, so my daughter so 3 out of the 4 in our household, from a household that was pretty good this whole time, one trip well, 2 trips, I guess, if you count Aiden flying, doing the one flight and bringing this stuff into our house. Freaking nuts. Like you're just not going to escape it. But
yeah, it's omnipresent at this point.
And so infectious. Like that's the other thing. I was nowhere even close to him. My theory being is because I was in the basement and because of kind of like maybe the air dynamics in the house, when he opened the room to go to the bathroom, COVID Q must have just spilled down the stairs and got me, which is literally 35 feet away from his door, at least.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got one for you too. So first of all, when was your first day of symptoms?
The actual day, it was a Sunday. So I don't know. I can't remember the
June. Was it June?
Let me look here.
I'm very curious for listeners. Just being that we both
June 12th.
Okay. All right. So mine was June 26. So interestingly, I've been independent, anesthesia, all this stuff. What are you laughing at?
I'm just like 2 weeks later.
Yeah. So literally, I was just going to take 1 week off, approximately 1 week off. Since COVID pandemic hit, I've not taken a vacation week. I've had some days off here or there, whatever, part of the scheduling, but I have not taken a week to like fly anywhere. So my husband goes to the College World Series in Omaha the week before. He's there. I'm going to fly in so I can drive back with him, in the rental. So the day I'm leaving on a Thursday, I had a full day of cases. He's like, hey, somebody, basically using apartments connected to a main house and it's family friends. And he's like, I was going to go do laundry in the main house, but the wife said, hey, just stay away from my husband. He just got positive COVID test. And he's like, I'm not going to do any laundry. And he's like telling me this, and while I'm in the operating room, and I'm like, well, can you get he's like, I'm going to get a rapid test. So someone actually dropped off some rapid tests to him, and he's negative. So I'm like, the whole thing is the guy that was positive, who's in the main house, which the dynamics are literally, there's a breezeway. The HVAC system, I don't think it's really I think they might be separated. Anyway, he was only talking to him in the garage 2 days before and with some distance, maybe 6 feet, I don't know, but for a little while. And so it's still kind of outdoorsy air. So my thought was at first when he said, this guy is positive, I'm going to take a test. I'm like, well, if he's positive, I'm just not, I'm going to cancel my flight. I'm not going to go up there. But since he was negative, even though it was negative, it
was a rapid though, right?
It was a rapid.
I want to talk about rapids.
Yeah. So I was like, I was hoping it would just say positive and I'd know, don't go. But there was still a chance. And I was like, I hadn't seen him in a week. And I'm like, well, we've been living day to day every day since the pandemic. And it's like, I wanted to see him. And then I show up, we work out the next day. And this is where the crazy psychology of what we do as humans with this weird COVID thing is we're going to the gym, we work out with masks on. There's not that many people in the gym. We go to these little anytime fitness kind of places. And, my husband was like, I feel like I'm just haven't really pushed myself through this workout. And I'm like, he's like, my muscles feel sore. I'm like the muscles you worked out yesterday, the day before? And he's like, no, like everywhere. I'm like, oh, that sounds viral. He's like, no, I always have allergies when I come up to Omaha. And I even could tell in his voice, like his voice sounded like a raspy, but he had some cigars hanging out. So it's like, you make these stories in your head to excuse it and to make it make sense. Like our brains are trying to make sense of everything. We talk about this all the time. So it's like allergies or cigar or like not getting enough sleep or having some drinks the night before, like all these things could explain it. And then he was negative Friday. Saturday, I wasn't even thinking of making him take the test, because he was feeling totally fine. And, maybe I was wrong and all this stuff, questioning myself. He takes a test. It's like 8 minutes in, and it's like no positive on the rapid. And then I'm like, he's like, come on, let's go. I was like, we got a problem. And it finally goes positive on the third day for the rapid. And I'm like, and I've been trying to just be like reasonable. I mean, not like a romantic, closeness. But like, we're still in the same little apartment and we're not wearing masks just around each other. And I'm like, well, I'm not even gonna bother. If I've been exposed, I'm exposed.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, we'll just see how it goes. He's like, it's like nothing. It's like, he's like, just a little bit, kind of like sounds like a little allergy stuff. And that little Friday thing where he felt the achy, like it was gone by the next day. And then Sunday I get that, like, it's not like a super sore throat. It was like this little like irritation, like scratchy feel somewhere. But when I swallowed, it wasn't really sore, but something's getting a little irritable.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and then by Sunday night, by Monday morning, I had 101.5 degree fevers. I had chills, no sweats, major headache, migraine, like photophobia. Even sounds and lights were bothersome to me. And the fatigue was profound. Like I've had mono and 2 pneumonias in my lifetime, and I really haven't been sick. I've never taken a sick day from work, which is not always something to be proud of. I had been sick, but still had to go to work, so, shorthand or whatever. But I could function. But this took me down like nobody's business. And then Tuesday, during the day, it was like diurnal. It was like this 100.5 during the day, 101.5 at night. This went on for 3 days, Kevin. So I call my primary doctor.
3 days that you felt like, and you would get the headaches and stuff?
Oh, I was like bedridden.
Oh, wow.
My husband I was so weak. The problem is I felt like I could never keep up with the metabolism and the temperature demands from a fluid status. I was like constant. I felt like my mouth was like, it was just like, I've just felt dehydrated the whole time, but I would still have to get up and urinate frequently. So it was like the demand on me to get up and go to the bathroom every time was just like horrific. So Corey, like by Tuesday, Wednesday, he was like came to me just trying to be a good husband and help me because I was so weak. And it was to the point where, this is what he tells my friends, he's like, of course, my sats were like mid 90s. At one point, it was like high 80s at first, but it was like, once I took some deep breaths, I was like in the mid 90s. So I had the pulse ox, checking fevers frequently or temps frequently. But I was so weak and I felt little PVCs occasionally, which I do normally anyway. But I was like, you know what? My husband's not medical. We're in this little apartment. And I said, do you know what to do if like my heart stopped or I, was unconscious? Like, that's how bad I felt. Like, I felt like, I told Corey, it's like, I do not. And like, he was staring at me with like, most of the time he's like, come on, like, stop that. This time he was like totally engaged. I said, do you know what to do if I'm non-responsive or I don't have a pulse? Or I was like, I put up 2 fingers. I said, first of all, there's 2 things. Grab your phone, call 911, put it on speaker, put it to the side. Grab my body and put it on the ground. Again, 2 fingers, 2 inches, push my chest in 2 inches and don't stop. I'm literally telling him this. And he's like, just like nodding his head. I said, I'm telling you this because I do not want you to be the husband that felt so helpless and didn't know how to help his own wife. And so anyway, long story. So Dr. Glockenfleck, if you never heard this guy's story, he's a ophthalmologist who's now big on social media, but his heart stopped in the middle of the night and his wife happened to witness it. And she saved his life doing the exact same thing.
Holy crap.
Anyway, yeah, that's a guy I'm trying to get to interview, but he's so popular now. We're little people to him. Anyway, so that's how serious I felt the weakness. And I called on Wednesday to my primary care and I just said, hey, any thoughts, and she's pretty much by the book. And she might be hearing this recording, by the way, for this. And I just, I was like, I'm just wondering if she thought steroids or anything, like what her thoughts are. And we just kind of left it like, got to write it out, and I'm like, anyway, I've got to work eventually here too. And we've got to get back to Austin, and I need to get, all these things. And it just really throws things into a flux. And I went and texted her back, and I'm like, what do you think about Paxlovid, the antiviral? I said, I think I probably should start that. And she's like, well, it would have to be off-label use because you're not over 50, or you're just not, older with comorbidities, you're healthy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what do you think? And she's like, well, ethically, if for some reason it was a shortage, I would be uncomfortable, prescribing that, which I understood. But in the case of where I was in Omaha, there was no shortage of it. So she's like, I'll go ahead and call it in. Corey, my husband, goes to get it like 1:30 or something like that in the afternoon. I take those 3 pills twice a day for 5 days. I start them on Wednesday. Within an hour, the taste of the antiviral is in my mouth. Like not when I swallow them, but I could tell it was absorbed. Like it has this metallic, nasty taste, mm-hmm. which you have the whole time, by the way, at least for me. And my taste and my smell were altered too, and you're sick, and nothing really works great. But within 2 hours, that migraine was the first thing that went away. I swear I feel like it's the inflammatory, like inflamed meninges.
Well, there's a lot of things it could be.
Yeah, it could be, especially when we talk about pain. But in general, when we think about the cytokine storm and inflammatory situation, it could be anything. But you're trying to understand all this stuff. But within
we're trying to tell ourselves a story that makes sense.
Right. And there's got to be an explanation. It's just, you don't have the science. You're just trying to make sense of it with your own mind. But the first 2 hours, the migraine went away. Then within 3 hours, my fevers broke, like completely, like hard stop. Within 4 hours, my energy was to a level that my husband was like, who the hell are you? Like it was, in some ways, it seemed miraculous when you look at the trajectory and the sustained problem I was having for several days straight. And that's without any ibuprofen or Tylenol at that time too. So anyway, I never had a fever after that point. There is a possibility of recrudescence or resurgence of these symptoms once you stop those 5 days. I held on, even though it tasted awful and I couldn't really enjoy food that much with that. I held on through Sunday. I would say there was still some lingering endurance problems for a few days, despite the fever being gone. But I've been feeling a lot better. And all of the crud, and I feel like it's not like green or yellow sputum or anything like that. It feels like it just is stuff that's coming up, like with the cilia and your trachea, and traveling up and kind of suddenly builds up around the vocal cords, and you cough it. And it's not like I have a ton of drainage from this direction. I mean, I sound nasally, but I don't have a ton of stuff here. So the cough and the altered voice and those things seem to be generated a lot from here. And this is my personal take on it from my own experience. But I have no sympathy for people that try to say that this stuff is made up.
You mean the symptoms of COVID?
Just COVID in general, that it exists. I mean, there's people that have that crazy conspiracy stuff, or minimize it, or like you said, it's just the flu. It's like this is the worst I felt with any illness in my entire life. I even asked my mom and dad like how I was presenting when I had some of the stuff when I was younger.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of things. Number one, I think this is the kind of key thing, and this is why I have so few friends. But I would just say is, because you took Paxlovid does not necessarily mean that was causative of the recovery. You were day three.
Of course not.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to the listeners out here, because it you know,
it's N of 1.
It is an N of 1, and that's why we have studies. I'm adamant about the fact that don't ever practice by anecdote, practice by evidence on this. So yes, am I saying don't take Paxlovid? I'm not saying that at all. But I don't want anybody listening to this to hear, oh, Dr. Katie took Paxlovid and because of that, then this must be the one. That's why you have to look at the studies, because there's so many things that influence all of those factors. That I just want, that's why I just want to make sure on that. Cause I don't want to make sure, I don't want to say that we're promoting anything based on.
I don't even know who makes it. I'm just saying.
No, I know. And but cause I've seen that happen. Yeah. People do one thing and they say, well, it's because I took this. And obviously the more that we learn about this stuff, the more you recognize that there's so many inputs that for anybody to say, this is the one thing, we just don't know. That's the purpose of research and studies. That's why we have them. On the second hand, the scary thing here is just how unpredictable this is. Like,
people thought I would just be like my husband.
I wanted that. I was so mad. Like, I was like, I'm vaccinated, I'm boosted. I was hoping for one of those asymptomatic and the spreader cases where you don't even know you're sick and you just get at all else. But no, I mean, mine was only 12 hours, and I did the same thing with the headache. I was like, God, is this good? Is this meningeal inflammation going on? Like, I mean, because I talk this stuff but I'm still trying to create these narratives in my head. And that was the part of me that for the 12 hours that I couldn't sleep on that night from 6 to 6, I was like, oh man.
Especially when I don't get migraines.
I don't either. And so I'm like, well, what's the input and what's this and the scary and all that stuff. But the unpredictability is the thing that just kills me.
Yeah.
And now, granted, the biggest thing is you're vaccinated, and I think you're boosted. Are you boosted too?
Double vax, one boost, because I'm less than 50 years old.
So our situation, I never felt scared like the point where I wasn't that bad. Like, as I said, after that hellish kind of 12-hour period, I was like, I mean, that's kind of a scary thing, because then I'm like, this is like nothing. I'm like, this is not bad at all. And then you're just waiting because you have to wait the 10 days and all this other crap. But the infectiousness of this thing is absolutely nuts. So, and then the testing thing, and this is the thing that drives me crazy. All these stupid rapid tests, the only utility that I see them having is if they're positive, because if they're negative, they tell you nothing. Like, I took my first one on the first day and it was negative. And then I looked up what in the rapids, there's like a 67% false negative rate. And so you don't know. Right. And so I never retested again, because I didn't want to, I'm like, this is the only exposure I got. We know this is COVID, and there's no point for me to drive down and get a PCR test for it. Yeah. But the point for those rapids, I really think is if you're feeling like symptoms and and it's positive, then you're positive. If you have exposure and you're taking it as positive, then you're pretty sure that you're positive. But a negative doesn't really do you any good. Right. And if you're negative without symptoms, I would do like what we ended up doing with my wife and daughter before we flew, and then just keep doing the PCRs just to make sure. Yeah. But yeah, it's crazy. So I want to say, how has it changed? Has it changed how you plan to travel now? Or because you got a big trip coming up. So I'm like kind of curious about this. You have a big trip. Yeah. Not in a couple months. So
yeah. So the isolating from people would be a big one. That's, of course, I have to work in a clinical setting, so it's kind of hard to, avoid. But I'm wearing masks the whole time, and either a KN95 or N95. And I think the way I've structured for our trip is as I would normally in the past have maybe hopped to a couple extra places. I mean, there's still risk, but like each place will be like 9 or 10 days. Mm-hmm. So that way, if there's some sickness, if there's some bad weather, all these unpredictables, that it gives you a little bit of leniency. Mm-hmm. And I try to go more nonstops. I've actually always, when it's international flights, have taken economy, because I'm like, I don't want to spend my money on anything other than just economy, because I could use that money towards like great lodging, or I don't want to say I'm a cheapskate. I just think that you you work hard for your money, and if you can still get to your destination and spend a quarter of the price, why wouldn't you? That's kind of me. And I can endure it. But I think about most of these international flights are like 3-seater, 4-seat in the middle, 3-seat.
3 seats. Yeah.
And there's much more volume of people. Now, the way that they filter out, my understanding, away the in general, the overall airflow, it's kind of like straight in and out. It's not circulating like this.
Yeah.
Correct me
It's
if
like,
I'm wrong.
no, well, because I looked at the diagrams on that, and so the air on the planes is generally pretty good. It's just the problem is it's basically the row in front of you, row in front of you, row behind you, and those next to you.
Yeah.
So, and if you're on a full international flight,
Yeah.
and then who knows what the bathroom situation is.
Yeah. So what I've decided, because I will not pay for first class, I don't have the money for that. The premium economy is more expensive, obviously, than economy, but the structure is 2 seats. 2 seats.
Like 2, 3, 2.
Yeah, it's so we're picking like the 2 to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And so just trying to create like a little bit more of a buffer with that, is like, I don't want to have someone right next to me. Like, they got to be behind me, and we pick the ones that are like in the front. All we got is
with no place to put luggage under the chair in front of you.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah. Which is not always ideal, but I realized that the premium economies are going fast, like even months out. So I'm like, I didn't have any choices of the ones behind where you could put stuff under.
Well, and I generally prefer like, that's a big deal to me. Like, that was on someone probably say they wanted to put us in one of those, and I like having to, we put everything under the chair, but I never thought until this moment that actually makes sense. Because if you're in premium economy and you have nobody in front of you, now you're only worried about the people behind you. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a good idea. That's worth it. Like, as long as you can stick your stuff in the overhead compartment or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And that's a good way. And the other thing I like what you're doing is you're going for 5 weeks or whatever. And I think that's the other big thing is, instead of pushing hard, if you have like a home, like a hub ish, and you can at least then, because this thing I think I said at the beginning of this episode, I just can't imagine being that sick anywhere and having to move or do what, screwing it all up. Like, mine was only 12 hours as compared to 3 days, but man, it sucks. Like it sucked. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
Airbnb or some sort of home, something a little bit larger too than probably a hotel room. Yeah.
So, we have Airbnb in one place. We have friends that have a home, and they're reasonably careful, even though it can happen to anybody. We might do a little jaunt for 2 or 3 days, just to some wineries and stuff, just to kind of experience the things. It's not in the US, so it might be a different kind of level of, I don't know, respect for situations, who knows. And the other one's an Airbnb and maybe a little jaunt, but still having like a main hub with no one else around except for that one time we're with some friends.
What about travel insurance? Have you thought about that?
So some credit cards, when you purchase them with those cards, can help. I have noticed in the past when I bought travel insurance, actually in one particular, like, you have to read the fine print. And so those are things, it might be nice to have an expert to talk about that for everyone's benefit. But you have to read the fine print, because sometimes you can get screwed, depending on what that circumstance is. And you have to go through the whole claim process, and it's not as easy as you always think. But I think because
even with the credit cards, because I said we have 2 claims out right now, and it's annoying.
Yeah. So I think the airlines themselves, with the COVID pandemic, depending on which kind of flights they are.
And what airline you're flying?
And depends, or just asking me which one?
It depends on what airline you're flying as well.
Right. Yeah. I'll have to go back and look at the updated policies because I think they're going to probably continue to evolve. But I think there's when you buy economy, you have less leverage.
Well, yeah, and I would, because this is something we obviously looked at because I had to rebook my flights. Luckily, we flew Air Canada. Air Canada until June 30th, 2022, you could change your flights for free. Now, free being no change fees, you just had to rebook at the new price, which kind of blows. But after June 30th, they're not doing that anymore. And I think the American airlines have all just said, we're done, whatever now. And that's so that's the thing about the trip insurance. Now I'm like, well, maybe we'll start looking at that, making sure that there's a COVID specific policy rider, which some of them have now.
Yeah.
Just because, that could be a big deal. If you're booking 4 flights and it's international specifically, even with economy, you're looking at, close to 10 grand sometimes, well, at least 10 grand. So. Yeah.
Luckily, so, it comes to points on credit cards. I actually, from my March 2020 trip that got canceled, I got some credit that they kept pushing from New Zealand out, which was really nice. So I used my credits to apply towards the premium economy seats. And then I used the purchase eraser, kind of with Venture Credit Card. They have where you can use your points towards paying basically those travel expenses off. So I got a massive discount. So it was much more affordable to do premium economy. You made me think about going back and reading through some of the details on some of my flights, but yeah, it's always a risk. And I'm still curious if they're going to require, I know the vaccine status is going to be required most likely, but as far as testing, we'll have to see what happens down the line and keep on top of that. But I would say the biggest thing that I'm looking at is I would rather do a nonstop somewhere far away and have an Airbnb the whole time and just stay there. And then we can do little things from there.
Yeah.
Than traveling around and have these huge itineraries, which we try not to do that kind of stuff anyway. It's just stressful. Yeah. But we do have a concert that we're going to go to because my husband likes to see, but I'm kind of I wonder how that's going to work. It just kind of depends on the environment and the culture of that place and what they have instituted. I don't know yet how that's going to work, but overall, we're not really big into big mass people events.
Yeah.
Especially in the US for reasons we don't even have to discuss. Viruses and violence. Yeah. It's my new coin phrase is viruses and violence are our enemies. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's really made it less enticing to travel. Honestly, with all of this, even though I've been kind of boosted with the native antigen of COVID, there's not a lot of respect for nature in general. Everything's can become politicized and people just don't understand this is a public health thing. And, I was just talking to someone else about that today, but I think if we were doing the right thing all the time and looking out for each other, it'd be different. But I wonder how frequently we're going to want to travel, and it might be based on how this all goes. So before we go, very careful, not have anything, people in the house, and follow the protocols. And you kind of, when it comes to a solo business owner, is have a plan for the week after I'm supposed to get back, and make sure I have backup for that week. Because if I get stuck, or if I'm sick or whatever, I've got to have plans. So yeah, that's how it changes things.
Yeah, I think single point, single airline direct flights, if at all possible, still makes sense.
And wear masks still on the plane.
and still wear masks. I did feel, I guess this is the one thing about having COVID before we went on this trip is man, I felt like I had the golden ticket and I was not careful at all. Cause I'm like, I'm boosted. I just had a COVID infection. Could there be some weird strain? Sure. But
Yeah.
Which was kind of nice. I did enjoy that, but
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think of the other thing. And here's the thing, you don't know, it's so unpredictable. I kind of go by, well, if you're vaccinated and boosted, and if there is some kind of specific booster in the future, I will definitely do those. I'm kind of wondering, I think I would rather just go out and do stuff now when I'm not traveling.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of push that envelope a little bit more. And then when I'm going to travel, then pull back.
Yeah.
Because I one of the nice things is one of the nice things about getting COVID is that you do then you have some degree of immunity, and that is relatively comforting. And again, I didn't have your experience at all. I just had really 12 hours that sucked bad. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say with that, other than we're young, we're healthy. I don't anticipate a lot of bad stuff, and we're vaccinated and we've done all that stuff. So I think I would rather, if I'm just going to get infected, I think I'd rather be infected when I'm not doing anything, going where, stressing about anything.
Of course.
And then kind of moving with that. But
well, you have the comforts of home and people around, and you're not
comfort the home.
Not a financial thing usually, unless it's
yeah. And then the other part is driving. We've done a lot of kind of local stuff, like 3-4 days here. And I'm just going to keep doing those. Like that's
fun.
There, and it's just, when you can drive, you can cancel them fairly easily. You're only looking at a hotel, and then vast majority of the time you can cancel your hotel room with no problem.
Yeah.
And we're lucky we have enough stuff certainly within 6 hours for sure. And within 2 hours, we got enough stuff to do that's just kind of, I'll just do more locally regional kind of stuff for the future, at least until next summer for sure. I don't need that stress again. I just don't need that stress.
Yeah. Well, I think that's I think a reasonable way to go about doing things, the way you said, just like trying to enjoy things a little more locally, and you have the luxury of just being at home. I think it's pushed me to getting a couple of physicians credentialed at the facility I cover, because in fairness to the surgeons and to myself, and is to create some layers of there's just I need to have backups. And even then it's not, I mean, that and that's for another conversation. I know we're going to finish this episode, but I would say that there is a huge, massive need for like anesthesia help and coverage, or anything in the medical field. It is so hard to find help, and it's one thing to plan vacations deep in the future, but the 24 to 48 hours, oh my God, I'm sick, I need coverage. Otherwise, these patients who've been waiting 4 months for this date to have surgery are going to get canceled because the surgeon doesn't have any anesthesia coverage. That is super stressful. And that is the hardest thing, that if people don't understand this, the medical system is the hardest thing for the medical system to deal with. And it's super pricey if you can get somebody to cover. The rates are going up higher for what people are demanding. So if I'm trying to get someone to cover me, it's super hard. So these are real life things that it affects how you do business too. So anyway. Yeah. Why don't you take us out? Any last comments?
Sure. So I would just say for everybody out there, this stuff is infectious as all get out. I mean, that's kind of the craziest thing. So that's a big takeaway there. Number 2 would be, you have no idea what your symptoms are going to be like. It can be my daughter is the last one who was infected, and I think she got some chills a little bit, but relatively, she's in isolation, but not a big deal. You could have the 12 hours of head's going to explode for me, or you can have the 3 days you think you're going to die with Dr. Katie. So you just don't know on this stuff. Plan your vacations wisely. And certainly those 3 weeks before you're going anywhere on a big major expenditure, I think I would be extra cautious when it comes to that. And other than that, I don't know what else to say on this episode. So if you have any comments, how about if you have any COVID related experiences when it comes to travel, just let us know. You can email me directly at drkevin@thechangedphysician.com. Join us on Saturday Salutations. We talk about all these little things every Saturday on our Facebook Live site. That's between 12 and 2 p.m. Pacific time. And until next time, stay well.
Take care.